Everybody else online here, I hope you've got video up so you can see Katie Spicer on the speaker screen there. I have known Katie from the time she became Katie, and that's from day 0, so quite a while. She's had an auspicious career in the space business, been in it a long, long time. We've had some excellent visits with her and some guided tours of the Space Center, which were awesome. I remember one thing in particular. Katie, at one time, if I got this right, was in charge of the bathroom on the International Space Station. I've always remembered that little tidbit. And she became a mission controller, and she's moved up and up and up. And now we have a great chance tonight to hear from her about the upcoming SpaceX flight for Crew 4. I think it's April 15th. She's the vehicle integration and test office manager for this flight, which means she probably has her fingers in just about everything that's happening. So I'm going to stop here and turn it over to Katie Spicer. Take it, Katie.
Well, thank you, Rocky. I appreciate that intro, and thank you for having me, all of you. When Rocky asked me if I would do this, I'd be honored. It's kind of fun. I have a great job, and I love describing what I do and encourage others to get involved and get excited about the space program, because it is pretty exciting. So I am reusing a presentation that I often use for younger elementary, middle school kids, because I try to encourage all those who have a potential to start studying hard. And so I do a lot of elementary and STEM related presentations. So I thought I would just use the same one, but we'll just discuss different things. And we'll just go. And if you have questions, I don't know if someone's monitoring the chat. I don't have the chat up. So, but feel free to put questions in the chat, and then I'll do a lot of just questions and answers, because I think a lot of the times my audience has the best talking points, really. So I'm looking forward to doing this and looking forward to getting to know some of what you guys are interested in. So first do you see my screen? Yeah.
We got it.
Okay. And am I sharing my presentation screen?
Yes.
Okay. So do you see the agenda? Awesome.
Looks good.
Great. So I'm going to give you a little introduction, a little bit about my career path and what I do, and then kind of what's going on at NASA. And then just, like I said, questions and answers. Feel free to type them in the chat if you don't want to forget, and then we'll do that at the end. So I am an Air Force brat, as Rocky mentioned. So I moved around a lot, and you might recognize some of these pictures. But when I first really knew Rocky and Ginny, this is what I looked like in that bottom right. And then Rocky is on the top left. You can kind of see him. And then, we kind of crossed paths here and there. And so I would really say that Rocky and Ginny are kind of like my second parents. They really are our long-time family friends. Ginny taught me how to sew, so she's like my second mom, and she just, I really think a lot of their family. So this was the last picture we took back in January. I think it's a pretty good picture. And that's my husband, which you might have seen at the very beginning. He was helping with my audio visual. So just to give you a little bit about then after growing up, this is background again. I currently live in Seabrook, Texas, and that's where we kind of run into, sometimes Rocky will come down and we'll see each other here. I have 3 adult children, and I work for a contractor, Leidos, at the Johnson Space Center. So I met my husband at Penn State. We both went to Penn State, and he was my bridge partner. We were the only 2 undergraduates who played bridge in the mid-90s, and so we hit it off. And we've been married. Actually, this is 26. This is old. I should have said it. We've been married for 27 years now, and we have 3 children. These were my kids when they were little, but now they've grown up. And my son, Andrew, Drew, is a pilot. He's a lieutenant in the Air Force. And he actually is now flying. He is a co-pilot of the KC-135, but now he's learning a new plane, the KC-46. So he's stationed in Wichita, but he goes back and forth between Oklahoma to train. My daughter, Christy, is a med student down at UTMB, and she is graduating. She just got matched for her residency, so she's going to be going into anesthesiology. And then my younger son, here pictured with my dad, is a chemical engineer. And he actually lives not too far, about 45 minutes away. So it's really great. We love getting to see him often, and he's renovating his house. So he's a busy guy. So this is a picture of all of us a couple years back, and really proud of my family. They've really kept me busy, and I had stayed at home with them when they were growing up. So I didn't start working until they went back to school. And then I got a chance to get into the Johnson Space Center. This might be a little out of order, but I'm gonna just go off of my slides. I have a couple hobbies. I do a lot of hiking and camping. I run, and which also I should say, I used to run with Rocky. Rocky and I have done a couple 5Ks. I think we did a 5K 1 or 2 times. And then I'm also a Girl Scout Gold Award mentor. So I work with young women who are working on their top award in Girl Scouting called the Gold Award, and it gives me a lot of satisfaction. But kind of back to how I got to where I am today. I did graduate from Portsmouth High School, same as Rocky's younger son. I believe Andy graduated in Portsmouth. Is that right, Rocky? I think so. Might have been. Oh, I think
he was in Vienna, Virginia.
Okay. And then I went to the Penn State University, and where I met my husband, and I graduated in 1995 with a microbiology degree. As I mentioned, I stayed at home with my kids, so I really didn't start working until about 10 years later. And then I got a job at Johnson Space Center, and I really did start in the lab, just doing dishes, pretty much, ordering consumables, updating calibrations and maintenance, lab maintenance. And I kind of worked my way up into doing a little bit more science and running the experiments that were being performed with the astronauts as human research. And so I got into the science payload operations, and the payload operations are, there's lots of payload operations, but I focused on the human research side. So when crew members participate in a study, whether it's cardiovascular or nutrition or any of that, they usually take data collection in the beginning. So blood samples, exercise, VO2 max type things, and then they do it on orbit, and then they do it after returning. So they get to see that long duration effect onto humans, preparing us for how to better prepare our astronauts for long duration spaceflight. I think you're probably familiar that Mark Vande Hei is up there right now, and he's going to be up there for almost a year. Scott Kelly had done a year. They had a lot of human research just to understand what that 1 year duration on the ISS occurred. And so I did that for about 10 years. And then I was really interested in becoming a flight controller and working in mission control. So I changed kind of routes and worked with a lot of engineers. I was able to talk my way into a job, and you can see me here in this picture in mission control, and my specialty is the bathroom. So I am part of the waste management systems, which we have a bathroom. We have actually 2 bathrooms on orbit. One is functioning right now. One is still in the development stages. We can talk about that a little bit more, but oftentimes people want to know how you go to the bathroom in orbit. It's really simple. It just takes away, instead of on Earth where you have gravity removing the waste from as you flush, it's a little different in that on orbit we have a fan that creates a vacuum that pulls away that waste, and it separates it into the liquid waste and the solid waste. You can kind of see here in this picture where the liquid waste goes down a funnel and is collected separately. That liquid waste kind of gets spun to take the air out, and then routes the fluid into our processing hardware and systems. And then that stool, the seat that you see there in the bottom, that's for the solid waste. That solid waste actually just gets destructive re-entry, so that just gets packaged up and sent home. But all of the liquid waste, all of that urine is reclaimed. We're up to almost 90% of reclamation on orbit, which is pretty darn impressive. But there's a little bit of brine that gets dumped off the side, but really a lot of the water, the coffee, today's coffee becomes tomorrow's coffee for the crew members. So it's kind of pretty exciting. And we can go into that in more detail if you have more questions. So then recently I switched jobs again, and I'm now working more for integrating the vehicles with the commercial crew providers. So the commercial crew program has SpaceX and Boeing. I'm working with SpaceX to specifically work with a crew 4 that's coming up. And I just make sure that their integration, so everything that the human side of things, the operational perspective, is taken into account into the vehicle, the Dragon capsule. And the next slide is a little bit younger, but I start off explaining big picture for my elementary students is that you might not know this, but we have an international space station that is, supported with US and international partners and the Russians. We have people up there 365 days every year. We've been operating for about 20 years now. So the crew members up there, it varies in size, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but to get up to the ISS, we used to have a shuttle, and a lot of the kids I talk with don't know the shuttle days, so sometimes I'll throw a picture in there of that, but that ended in 2011, and we were relying on our Russian assets, the Soyuz, to take us up from Russia, from Baikonur. And most recently, just a year and a half ago, or I think it was last June, we started flying on, maybe it was 2 years ago. 2020 kind of threw me for a loop. I lost a year there, but I want to say it was June of 2020. So that's a year and a half ago. SpaceX launched our first crew from the American soil in quite a while, in decades. So they take a rocket, and the rocket propels the space capsule. So the F9 rocket takes the Dragon capsule and sends it up to the space station, so that the crew members can live in orbit and work. So you see a little picture here of the Dragon capsule, and live on the International Space Station. So SpaceX has done a lot of exciting things with their program, and it's building more and more. But my job is to make sure that the crew member, because we're sending up NASA crew members on a commercial vehicle, that not only everything is safe, there's a lot of engineering that goes into that, but there's just that operational perspective of, yes, you meet requirements, your vehicle has all the right safety systems, but can the operator, can the crew member really touch that button to do, to release the parachutes? Can they actually physically in their suit under pressure do that action? So things like that, and taking in habitability, understanding that they have sometimes 6 to up to 48 hours that takes to get up to the ISS. So that habitability in that small capsule, that's taken care of. So that's eating and having enough water and having waste control and all those things that we love to live in space, the challenges that we have. So, SpaceX has recently been in the news. I don't know if you've seen, but they are doing commercial venues as well. So last fall, they did an Inspiration 4 that was all commercial crew members. So they didn't even involve NASA, where they sent their capsule up, actually higher than the ISS, and had a lot of great science. And it was funded. They did a lot of fundraising for March of Dimes. So it was kind of a neat experience. And we loved listening to that. And NASA gets to hear about those lessons learned, but really that is all SpaceX. They work with FAA to get all those licenses in effect, and they take care of that effort. There's a lot of other commercial providers out there that are providing experiences. I'm sure you've seen Blue Origin, just sending up people here and there for a short flight, very minutes, and then bringing them back down. So eventually, who knows? And I kind of put this slide out to the kids because I'm like, why should you study? Because you will be, those next generation will be the ones that are going further and doing more, whether it's with the government, NASA, or whether it's a commercial venue. There's a lot of opportunity going on right now in space, and I can kind of talk about the Artemis program and the human landing system that is projected here on the left. That is we're hopefully going back to the moon. So I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to show you a couple pictures of the ISS and talk a little bit about the ISS crew now. But like I said, I think this is a good, we'll just keep going. We'll take pictures, we'll take questions anytime. But these are just some pictures of the ISS. You can kind of see here the Dragon capsule right there on the left. I don't know if you can see can you see my pointer? So on this left-hand picture, but on the right-hand side is the Dragon capsule. This is the HTV. So the HTV is a Japanese cargo vehicle, and it sends up supplies, spares that help maintain the ISS, payloads, so science experiments, things that go outside to catch, space dust and things like that. So that's a supply vehicle. And Japanese send up one, and then also our Northrop Grumman commercial cargo sends up the Cygnus vehicle. So that's not pictured here, but that's another cargo vehicle. Here's a crew member on EVA going outside. And here is an older picture of the crew. So Samantha Cristoforetti, I chose this one because I know she is actually part of the crew 4 who will be going up in April. And I just kind of like to take that picture to kind of show you how they sleep too. So they live and work and have fun on the ISS. The ISS is kind of like a 5-bedroom house. That's kind of what we kind of explained. Oh, here's some eating. So it's like a 5-bedroom house supported by a number of international partners. We usually say the US side, but it's really the US and international partners, and then the Russian side. So they're kind of separated into those two halves. The crew members, the international partners in the US, they go up. That time spent on their side, we supply all their food, all that waste processing, all of that water, exercise equipment, that all happens on the US side, and it's about the size of a 5-bedroom house. The Russian side, the Russians kind of stay on their side. They do kind of meet in the middle for shared meals sometimes, but all of their work, all their science, all of their maintenance is done by them. We can share tools, and there are various handshake agreements bartering that if something breaks, we can use their bathroom and vice versa. So the ISS flies about 300 miles, says 220, but it's about 300 miles above the Earth, about 17,000 miles per hour. And like I said, this is a collection of modules that were flown by the shuttle. It was built by the shuttle. And each module was sent up in the different shuttle bay. There's a Japanese side, there's a ESA supplied module, and then these are in the middle, were all US supplied. There is a Canadian arm that you often hear that helps with robotic operations outside. We actually have a robotic arm that can fix itself. That's kind of cool. That saves the crew members from having to go outside. There's also something called the back porch. This is a Japanese airlock that can send things out, oftentimes small payloads, that will be sent up inside. Crew needs to fix something or start something, and then sends it outside, which is pretty cool too. And they have a little robotic arm as well. Let's see. So as I mentioned, how much room? It's like a 5-bedroom house. There is one bathroom. We actually sent up a second toilet, and I can talk about that a little bit. That was more of a developmental test objective. So we call them DTOs, and where they put together an experimental unit. It's intended to go for long duration on Orion. And so they wanted to try it out as a test bed on the ISS, and ISS is like, well, if it works, let's keep it. And so it's been operating. It was shut down for a little bit. They're planning on operating it again. Again, it's still a developmental test, so it has to collect data to make sure that it's processing correctly and that it's spinning correctly and that the crew members can use it without hearing protection. So little things like that. It's being operated, but so hopefully we'll have 2 bathrooms in a little bit, but currently we only have 1 bathroom. The Russians have a second bathroom as well. And like I said, there's handshake agreements to help each other out if one of them is down for maintenance or repair. Let's see, so this is ISS now. And I had mentioned the commercial crew providers, CCP, that program. They work with both Boeing for the Starliner and SpaceX for the Dragon. Dragon is up and running, so the next flight will be Crew 4. The Starliner is still in development, and they have an operational flight test, so an uncrewed test that is hopefully happening a little later this fall, and then a crewed flight test later in December, hopefully. Some of the timing is still being adjusted, but hopefully those 2 things will happen. And then Starliner will be available for rides. Starliner and Dragon are very different approaches, and I really give government a lot of credit for choosing both of them, as unusual. But when they awarded the commercial crew transport contract, they said, both SpaceX and Boeing were in the running, and they said, we're going to award it to both of you. So we didn't put our eggs in one basket. They are very different vehicles, different capabilities. And I can talk more about that if you need it, but really just high level, they will be sending, SpaceX can send up to 4 astronauts. Boeing Starliner will be max of up to 5. So they have different seating arrangements and different cargo capabilities. And hopefully they'll both be options in the next year. Right now, this is our current crew on board. This is a collection of astronauts. So we're going to have the first 3 here. So this is Raja Chara. He is the commander currently. He flew up on Crew 3 last November. This is Tom Marshburn. He's a surgeon. This is Matthias. He is from ESA, and he also flew up on Crew 3. These are all Crew 3. These are 2 Russians. I think it's, I don't know the Russians' names. And then this is Kayla Barron. Kayla is also part of the Crew 3. And then this is Mark Vandehei. So Mark Vandehei went up almost a year ago, and he's coming home at the end of this March. So we're very excited to have him return home. And nice thing is that we know him personally. And so we're very much looking forward to having him return to his wife, because he's had to celebrate birthdays and an anniversary already while in space. And then coming up, as Rocky mentioned, April 15th currently is the target launch for the Crew 4. Crew 4 is commanded, Kjell Lindgren is over here on the far right. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but Kjell has a background. He's he's an emergency room doctor. He has flown before on the ISS a couple years ago. He is joined by the pilot, is Bob Hines. So actually it's a fairly Air Force crew. Kjell is Air Force, Bob Farmer is active duty Air Force, he's the test pilot. And then Samantha Cristoforetti, she's actually from Italy. She's served in the Italian Air Force. She has also flown a couple years ago. And then Jessica Watkins and Bob, they're both first-time flyers. Jessica's actually smart cookie. She is a geologist, and she has I think a couple PhDs, but she is flying as well. So they are headed up April 15th, hopefully. I think what else to talk about that? They will stay on orbit until September. And so they will hopefully fly. Crew 3 will come home. So there'll be a couple-day handover, which is nice. It doesn't have to happen that way, but we're hoping it happens that way. And then Mark Vandehei is coming home. There's no other planned crew member during the Crew 4 stay. It'll all just be Russians and the Crew 4. So my work experience, you can kind of see here the a couple pictures of me from Mission Control. I do specialize in the waste management systems, and that's some of those are the patches. Crew 4 is right now my focus, and you can see a couple of Boeing crew members. So this is Butch Wilmore. He's going to be the commander of the Starliner for that crewed flight test, hopefully later this year. And Mike Fink, I call him Spanky, but Mike Fink, and this is Sunny Williams. Sunny Williams, not sure if she's backup. I think there's 3 of them. I think she's a pilot. So I think it's commander, pilot, and ISS commander. It's a joint test, so it's kind of a unique situation because it is just a crewed flight test. These are somewhat old pictures, but to tell, I could go on and on about the payload sciences. There are so many amazing discoveries that are going on in ISS, and a lot of them benefit Earth. I know we've had advancements in cancer research because of the delivery techniques that we learned about on orbit, because we could understand the capillary actions without the influence of gravity. So they were able to, make new delivery. We also a delivery of drugs and treatment, and then also crystallization. You don't think about it, but really amazing new treatments for genetic diseases just by understanding how things crystallize without gravity. Combustion, understanding how things burn without the influence of gravity. Fluid mechanics is just, there's a lot going on, not even to mention all the biological sciences. So human research, what happens to the human body, but then also, growing things in space. They do a lot of now plant and animal sciences. There's rodents and spiders and all sorts of things on orbit. And then also a lot of Earth observations. So a lot of the great pictures that you see of hurricanes or natural disasters come from the ISS, and it's really an amazing experience when you watch any videos. A lot of times the crew members will come home and they'll do like a compilation of their pictures, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's just really impressive. So moving on, the future programs, like I said, this is a very exciting time for, and I try to encourage younger generation to study hard and think about space as a real avenue for their future profession and hobbies and interests, because right now we have that commercial crew program, but we also have Gateway. So the Gateway, and this is I kind of put a couple of pictures in here. I can kind of go over it. But the biggest effort right now is trying to get back to the moon. So having a presence back on the moon is under the Artemis program. And the phase to get there is going to be first understanding, getting an orbiting space station, or it won't be fully manned for the full year, but like an outpost, and that's the Gateway. The Gateway will have propellant and supplies so that the crew members can have a place that's like I said, an outpost, and then land on the surface. We're kind of working with the Space Launch Systems, SLS, that hopefully is going to be rolled out here end of March and possibly being launched in the spring. So kind of keep an ear out that. I know some of the delays have gotten, so it might be more of a May target, but that it's SLS, it's Space Launch Services, but systems. But I think of it as super large because it's huge. It is a huge rocket, and it's going to help get the Orion Vehicle. The Orion Vehicle it's been around for a while. It's kind of repurposed a couple times from the different political decisions, but it is going to take us back to the moon. So it has a couple of different opportunities. You can kind of see there where the moon is and the orbiting outpost of Gateway. And then the human landing services the lunar payload services, all of these programs are really just starting. So the requirements and understanding how to supply those services are just now being defined. But it is very exciting because, oops, can't see this, but other ones were supposed to go away, but we're supposed to go back to the moon, or not to the moon, to Mars, because ultimately we want to get back to Mars. So you can't see this. Maybe I can show you the picture later, but this is where I come to the point where I'm ending my slideshow and my little information, and I give words of wisdom to the younger generation. You guys probably could give me words of wisdom, but things that I oftentimes will say are start early. So I try to encourage everyone to, tomorrow's the next day, you can learn more about space. Always ask questions. If you don't know why, ask. And you might not get your way, but ask for options. So you can always understand what a plan B or plan C might be for you. Find good mentors. I'm sure you guys have heard that before, and I'm sure you guys are mentors. I know Rocky and Ginny are both mentors to me. And having those friends and professional mentors that you can lean against and get information from is invaluable. Always ask for feedback. That was probably one of the harder things, becoming a flight controller and an instructor. So I wear two hats. I'm a flight controller in mission control, but I'm also an instructor for other flight controllers. And that was really the most difficult thing I had to learn, was to get feedback and work with it. Understanding that it's always constructive criticizing to get better, but it is very difficult to kind of strip the way you do things, the way you talk, the way you document things, the way you sit, the way you respond. But the flight controller, the person that sits in the seat, is no longer Katie Spicer. I would be called OSO, which is the Operations Support Officer. And doesn't matter if I like to talk an hour, I can have 1 minute, maybe 30 seconds, and I need to communicate that effectively. So getting that feedback along the way is how you get there, and that's how you learn. So sometimes it's hard, but always ask for feedback and then take the feedback. Sometimes you choose not to take feedback, but consider it and determine why you're not taking that feedback, and make that good decision. And this is an advice from my mother. My mother always told me this, that I can do hard things. And I try to communicate that to any of the students that I ever encounter, is that they can do hard things. It's difficult, but they can do it. And then the last thing I do is I encourage them to go find the next time that they could see ISS going over their hometown. So there is a website called Spot Station, and it'll give you time points and directional indications of where to look in the sky. This is, with degrees, but you can go on a map and they'll show you, look on this side of the sky and over that side, and you can see the ISS. That's really neat. We have been able to see visiting vehicles. So the cargo and the crew members who are going up to the ISS, you can see them trailing with the reflection of the light. So it's kind of neat. So I would encourage all of you, if you get a chance, to go to the Spot Station and find out the next time you can look up and see ISS going overhead. And then really finally, if you like NASA, there's a lot of different, I usually give this out to the teachers, but this is kind of fun too, just docking to the ISS. You can practice. This is not just for elementary kids. I've done it myself. and it's a lot of fun. Is you can just practice what the crew members do. They kind of give you a little simulation so you can dock to the space station. So if you have grandkids and you want to get them excited, you can check that out. And that is the end of my slideshow. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I can pull up different references and share them if you, oh, I think Jodine Compton has entered the waiting room. Can I admit her? I just admitted her, hopefully. So now I was just going to ask what kind of questions you have. I see there's a couple things on the chat, so now I can see them.
Katie, there's a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is, with all your time and experience in various parts of the program, have you been able to control the urge to go to space?
I would love to go to this. I would love to go to space, but I am too old. Actually, the last astronaut class, actually Mark Vande Hei was 45 when he got chosen as an astronaut. He was one of the oldest astronauts this past as a candidate. This past class, actually, they also accepted someone who's 45, but he was a flight doctor and he had like all sorts of great experience. I don't know if I would. I don't know at this point in time. I'm not sure I would go to space, but if I were younger, maybe.
Okay, the next question, how many vehicles can be attached to the ISS at one time? Is there emergency escape vehicle and how does it return to Earth?
That's a great question. So right now there are 2 Soyuz attached, and those are lifeboats, Russian lifeboats. They're brought the crew members up, and they can always be detached and take them home. We also have a crew Dragon, the SpaceX capsule, that's also attached. So those are currently attached, and that stays attached. That can also return home at any time. At the same time, you could also have another docked vehicle, so like a Boeing Starliner, they could also be attached. And then you could also have 2 cargo ships that are berthed. So on the US side, we have 2 docking ports and 2 berthing ports. The cargo ships use the berthing port and the crew members use the docking. The difference between that is berthing is when the robotic arm, so the capsule will come, or rocket will, the vehicle will come up very close to ISS and then ISS gets put into a hover mode where they just kind of free drift, and then the robotic arm grabs the capsule and brings it to the port, and then it gets very close. And then I also work with this mechanism that berths. I'm also a berthing mechanism specialist, so that I can send commands to berth the vehicle, where we send out capture latches. They're about 4 to 7 inches apart. We grab them, they pull them in to just 1/4 of an inch, and then we bolt using these really huge beefy bolts, and we bolt that vehicle. That's berthing. Versus docking, it's under the vehicle, the spacecraft, their control. They align using cameras and all sorts of cues. They get, just as the Soyuz does, they use a docking system. It's still, this is a US docking system, but it does a couple different series of a soft capture where it just kind of clicks like a lock. So it's a soft capture, but then it has some hooks that drive to pull that in tight, and then it can pressurize. So 2 berthing, 2 docking. Those the crew members, those are always available for escape if there's a contingency, and they return to Earth. They just come down, they deorbit and land wherever they land.
Okay, another question. Obviously, age enters the scene, but are older astronauts, both shuttle and ISS related, involved in any way, or do they retire and step away?
So the older astronauts are very involved. They are really more involved now in the development of all these programs. So all these programs, having that flight experience and developing those requirements for the next future programs, they do have radiation limits. So it's not so much age as the radiation limit that reduces their chances of flying or being assigned to a flight. And that's all monitored. Even Rocky, I think even his pilot probably had some radiation dosimeter on him, measuring how much radiation he was getting and limiting his flight time. So that's the same just with any other pilot. But then they are still very active in the programs. Oftentimes they are going to the commercial venues as well. So Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, SpaceX, Boeing, all those commercial providers are also hiring. So there's a lot of options for them.
How do you sleep on the ISS?
So sleeping on the ISS, I did show a picture of Samantha Cristoforetti in a sleeping bag, and the sleep studies actually have evolved quite a bit from the shuttle days even to ISS. I kind of compare this. Have you guys ever, you're sleeping, and then all of a sudden you wake up because you think you're falling. That sensation of falling is very common. The early astronauts reported that they didn't get much sleep because they didn't feel secure. So they developed some sleep restraints. So it's a sleeping bag with kind of like some bungees to hold you down. So some crew members float, prefer their hands up, but some hook them underneath these kind of like straps. They have sleeping bags. Now they can control the temperature to make it hotter or cooler, but they are in a compartment. It's called a crew quarter, and it's a rack. So all the ISS on the US side have these kind of like compartments that are kind of plug and play. It's a designed rack, which is brilliant because you can make a science payload rack, and you can just tell University of Wisconsin, hey, make these connectors, this power, this blah, 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 and it fits into this rack. Or you can have a full system, your processing of the waste collection, all your air conditioners, your computers, all those things fit into these compartments. They're called racks. And then they can fly up on the HTV, that cargo ship, and they can be swapped in and out. So if you needed a new system, you could just send it up. One of those racks, or actually 5 of those racks, we have 5 crew quarters. And so the crew members have a bedroom, very small bedroom with their sleeping bag, and they have a work computer, they have a private computer, and they have fans. And I say it so that, because it's hard to understand without gravity how much has to be controlled. So without gravity, we don't have any convection, we don't have any exchange of gases. And so all of the air circulation on the ISS is controlled through fans, and that ventilation between modules and within modules are very important. It's important for crew habitability, whether they're sleeping in their crew quarter, that carbon dioxide doesn't build up as they sleep and asphyxiate themselves. They also have alarms. So if the fan for that rack, it's a redundant fan, that if one of those, we have an intake and outtake, and then again, redundant intake, redundant output. And so those fans have alarms on them so that if they fail, the crew members won't be sleeping, they'll be woken up. And so the ground monitors a lot of that. The crew can fly their own vehicle. They have control over all those systems, but for the most part, the ground kind of monitors that. But habitability and sleeping on station is actually quite an endeavor. Also, other things that have changed along the way is lighting. So you can get, blue lights or warm lights. Your computer kind of softens at nighttime with the amber lighting. So we've also changed the lighting on ISS. On ISS, even though all the work surfaces, 4 work surfaces, you could be working up here, you could be working down the ground, it's all the same. But to help neurovestibularly, especially for new astronauts, we have lights on the overhead and no lights on the deck. So those lights are changed, is blue light or amber light or regular, so that they can help with the phasing to help them with their sleep patterns. So it's a long answer to that question. I get that from my father.
How do you control all the imported Earth microbes on the ISS?
Well, we don't send them up. So we really try to keep a clean vehicle and spacecraft. So all of the vehicles that go, whether it's cargo or crew, they are clean, they're wiped, they're tested to make sure they are not carrying any bugs or pathogens. Pathogens that are sent up for science, because we do have microbes and various things sent up for science, are controlled. There's always redundant containers, and a lot of the safety systems talk about the hazard controls. They identify the hazards, they put controls in place, both operational and engineering. And then the real big question mark is the crew members. What do the crew members bring up? So we try to protect the crew for multiple reasons before flight. They go into a 2-week quarantine. Everyone who is around them is quarantined, and that makes them not carrying something up to their crew members. It also keeps us on schedule. We don't want to get them sick right before flying. And actually quarantine is one of the things that I'm responsible for. So I'm doing all my schedules right now because everyone who comes into contact with them are in different group levels. So if you are living with the crew, meaning spouse or children for those 2 weeks, the first week is here in Johnson Space Center here locally. So if everyone quarantines at home, you can stay in your home. But if one of those people have to go outside, then you have to separate. So for 1 week upcoming April 1st, my household is going into quarantine. Tom won't be able to go anywhere, and we'll stock ourselves with the groceries, because then the next week we'll go out to Kennedy Space Center, and if anyone has to work with the crew, they're in different levels of quarantine. So whether if they have direct contact with the crew, or if indirect, like the kitchen and the housekeeping staff, they have different levels of protection to keep crew safe and also the ISS safe.
Any other questions out there in Zoom land?
We do not work 24 hours per day. Right. So we do have flight controllers work 3 shifts of, it's a 9-hour shift because there's some handover time. And then, I think, is that right? 9 hours. But there's 3 orbits, 3 different shifts in the handover. There is a scaled back amount of flight controllers that support when the crew members are sleeping. So there are some positions. There's a lot of different disciplines that are responsible for the power and the communications, and the flight director who monitors everything. Those positions are 24 hours, 3 different shifts. But then there are some other positions. My operations support officer, I mentioned I worked with the bathroom specifically, but my group is responsible for all the maintenance on the ISS. So if they have to change out a filter, or if they have to change out a brine recycle tank, or fix the exercise equipment, that is usually done when crew members are awake. So we only support the crew members' awake times and their work day, and so we have a little less. We don't staff 3 orbits. The COVID impact is kind of interesting. You didn't ask this, but 2 years ago when COVID hit, we all went virtual. It was really amazing to see how NASA responded to a pandemic. We have a couple different flight rooms that we use for trainings and simulations, and they immediately set up a different handover, a virtual handover. So one shift would come in. So for the first couple of weeks, people would quarantine, and if you had a shift, you weren't supposed to go anywhere. You just come into work. If you were feeling sick, that whole team then was in a separate room from the next orbit. So you weren't infecting you weren't infecting multiple orbits. You might have infected your one orbit, but then the disciplines got those replaced. So that each orbit had a different room, and the rooms were cleaned, various time points to make sure that we weren't transferring or unintentionally infecting someone else. Obviously, self-monitoring was a big thing. Luckily, the vaccinations have helped. So now we do direct handover. So our counterpart comes in, sits side by side for half an hour and handover. Also, though, it's also allowed us to allow our systems to be supported from home. So we now have voice loops, we have video feeds that I can get on my home computer. I have to VPN in, and I have security stuff that I have to do, but it gives me that flexibility of supporting teleworking. As if they were working on the bathroom, I don't need to go in for everything. I just need to help them for 1 hour, make sure that they change the tank correctly. I can just call in from home, so which also protects the flight control team and all of the people involved. I'm trying to think of some other interesting questions, but the pandemic has changed a lot of things. The tour that Rocky mentioned before, we can't give tours anymore right now because of the pandemic, but we are slowly going back on site now. So I will go into site maybe 2 or 3 times. Crew members have always been going in completing their training to keep on schedule, but everyone's masked up. We wipe down. We stay 6 feet apart from people. In the high point of COVID, we were, taking temperatures before walking into a building, that type thing. So.
And you're up and
I hate when that happens. I do it all the time. And actually, that is kind of fun. Now that so many people support virtually, it is actually interesting to see the change of our workforce, where you might see a kid in the background or cats walk across this. It's not as awkward, having someone start talking and you're like, you're on mute. Everyone does it. And so even, just early people all the way up to program managers. So it's kind of neat seeing how the teleworking has changed expectations for giving presentations and such.
all right, let me try. Same thing happened.
Is your question, are you still presenting in schools? I don't know if that's yours, but I can answer that one while you get set up. But yes, I am still presenting in schools, but it's all virtual. And that's mainly for the schools guidelines. So it makes it easier actually, because I don't have to travel. So it makes it easier to fit in my day. I don't know if Mark was able to get his phone working or not, but you're welcome to type it in the chat.
Okay, Katie, that's a great, great program, and I really appreciate your doing this for us.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks for inviting, and everyone enjoyed the information. I can actually, I'll put my, I will put my email in the chat so that if anyone thinks of a question, or Mark, if you come up with, if you wanted to.
Let me see if I can come back through. I just took one. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. In the case of when you mentioned an astronaut being up there for a year, or maybe even a month or two, or that kind of thing, how is communication registered if you have a wife and kids at home? Kids that might want to talk to their dad or their mom?
Yeah,
I don't know how that's set up.
Actually, there's a lot of different ways to communicate with crew members. They have email and they have sync points. So multiple times during the day, their email they can't surf the web or anything like that, but they can download things and upload things. They also have something called an IP phone so that they can talk. We also have video conferences. We have private medical conferences, private family lines. We can patch in schools. And then also there's ham radio. There's a long time ago, they only had ham radio over ground sites, and they still do that sometimes with schools or hobbyists that if they're interested, if you guys are interested in ham radio, you can coordinate with NASA to talk to the crew members. The Russians have less communication paths, so sometimes for emergencies and such, they share our assets, but they only use ground. We use GPS, so we have a lot of different options for video, data, and voice.
And I guess a final question, since I went to the Henry Ford Museum on this past weekend where they have a moon exhibit. And of course, you see the control room, very familiar to me when I was in school. Pretty much all white shirts and dark ties and all male. How does that look today? I mean, is it like a 50-50 split, or is it?
It is pretty much a 50-50 split. There have been times when I've walked into the control room and it is almost all women, women and men of color, various cultures. I would say all cultures are there, all different races. And I think the workforce is intentionally makes an effort to have a diverse team, mainly because it helps us all to get better and creatively approach problems and situations, to understand the different perspectives. But the flight control room itself, there would be different things because there's no ashtrays. Number one, no ashtrays. But the workforce, the clothing is probably still professional. I think someone actually had some pink hair the other day, but they kind of pulled it back and kind of kept it like underneath, pulled back. So we are on camera. You can go out and look for NASA TV, either online or certain cable stations carry it. So there is a professional attire requirement. And then, like I said, no one's smoking.
Is there an estimated future useful life of the ISS?
Yes, it's only going until 2028. No, actually, I think it was extended to 2030. I think it just recently was extended. So I actually got a whole bunch of texts from friends around the country saying, I just heard they're going to stop the ISS. And it was always going to be ending. It was going to be ending, I think, in 2025, and they extended to 2028. 2030 is now the end of the life of ISS. Interestingly enough, Axiom is a commercial provider that is, they received, awarded a contract to put a commercial segment on the front of ISS. And if you type in Axiom, and they'll show, I mean, actually, it's really cool YouTube. I should have thought to pull that up, but if you go to YouTube and type in, I'll write it in here, Axiom on YouTube. They will show you their plans for the next space station. And they're going to attach the segment first, just one segment, and then they'll build off of it. And then ISS will be destructive reentry. So. It is pretty exciting though to watch the video. It's pretty cool. And NASA is partnering with Axiom so that they can learn those things, learn what we've learned. So.
This is Dick Bremer. How high does the ISS orbit? Is it a pretty circular orbit?
It is a pretty circular orbit. It's about 300 miles above Earth. It has orbital decay, so it's constantly falling. I kind of explain it to my elementary students that you know, when you're in orbit, gravity is still going to pull you down, and so it's slowly coming down. And so we control our attitude a couple different ways. We obviously have propellant with the vehicles, whether it's Russian Soyuz Progress or our commercial crew vehicles. They can prop us up, but we do a lot of momentum management control with big gyros. So we have our CMGs, are, I don't know what that stands for, but they're big momentum gyroscopes, and they do a lot of attitude control. There are 4 of them, and they can make them flip around. It can flip around, it can go upside down. It's really pretty impressive. And so they do a lot of that control, trying to keep around that same height above the Earth. It's kind of interesting. If you ever look at mission control on TV, you'll see each discipline that's responsible for the power or the data or whatever. Attitude control, they all have different symbols. Like for us, we have Oso is bear in Spanish. So we have a little bear that sits on our console with like a little work tools. The attitude control is a bat, like a baseball bat for attitude control. But if you ever watch mission control, if you see a little gremlin stuffed animal, the gremlin moves to whichever console is having problems. So sometimes it's the biomedical engineers if their exercise equipment's not working. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's Spartan, the power, whatever is not working. The gremlin little stuffed animal is visiting that discipline. Any other questions?
I think you got them, Katie. Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you so much for doing this. It's it's really a privilege for us to have somebody with their fingers in the pie to tell us what's going on. So thanks so much for doing it.
You're very welcome.
Amen.
Thank you for all the information. It was great.
I think come, you have questions, I have my email in the chat. So you're welcome to contact me and just let me know who you are and you're a friend of Rocky, and then I'll answer you. Maybe.
Rocky's the key. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. You have a great night.
Thanks all for
Okay.
participating tonight.